I didn't want my dad to walk me down the aisle because he's in a wheelchair. My wedding was supposed to be in 6 weeks and I was stressing about everything. The flowers, the music, the guest list, but mostly about my dad. He'd been in a wheelchair for 3 years after a construction accident crushed his spine. He was still the same guy who taught me how to ride a bike and scared away my first boyfriend, but I knew he felt different about himself. Last month, we were looking at wedding photos online when I noticed how he got quiet. Every picture showed fathers walking their daughters down long church aisles, and I could see him staring at his legs. He didn't say anything, but I knew what he was thinking. That night at dinner, I brought up the ceremony plans. I told him I'd been thinking about having my brother Jake walk me down the aisle instead. I said it would be easier for everyone, and that Dad could just wait at the front with the rest of the family. The look on his face made my stomach drop. He got really quiet and just said, "Okay," in this tiny voice. My mom shot me this look like I'd just kicked a puppy. After dinner, I heard them talking in their bedroom. Dad was saying maybe he wasn't cut out for father of the bride duties anymore. I felt terrible, but I stuck to my plan. I called Jake and asked if he'd walk me down the aisle. He was confused and asked what was wrong with Dad doing it. I explained that I didn't want Dad to feel bad about not being able to walk. Jake got quiet for a minute, then said I was being an idiot. He told me Dad had been practicing rolling his wheelchair in straight lines in the garage every day for weeks. Apparently, he'd been timing himself to make sure he could get down the aisle at the right speed. He'd even asked the church if they could remove some pews to make the path wider. I felt like the worst daughter in the world. I realized I was trying so hard to protect Dad's feelings that I'd completely hurt them instead. He thought I was ashamed of him being in a wheelchair. The next morning, I found Dad in the garage with his wheelchair rolling back and forth between 2 orange cones he'd set up. He was practicing turns and checking his watch. When he saw me, he stopped and looked embarrassed. I sat down on his workbench and asked what he was doing. He said he'd been practicing so he wouldn't mess up my big day. He wanted to make sure he could get me down the aisle smoothly without bumping into anything or going too slow. That's when I started crying. I told him I was sorry for suggesting Jake walk me instead. I explained that I was worried he'd feel sad about not being able to walk, but I'd made everything worse by trying to fix something that wasn't broken. Dad rolled over and took my hands. He said the accident took away his legs, but it didn't take away his job as my father. He'd been looking forward to walking me down the aisle since I was 5 years old, and no wheelchair was going to stop him from doing it. I asked if he was sure he wanted to do it, and he laughed. He said he'd been dreaming about this day for 26 years, and he wasn't about to let me give his job away to my knucklehead brother. We spent the rest of the morning practicing together, Dad rolling beside me while I walked in my pajamas, both of us laughing when he took the corners too fast. He showed me how he'd planned to position his wheelchair during the ceremony, so I could still hold his arm like traditional father-daughter walks. On my wedding day, Dad rolled me down that aisle like he was escorting a queen. He decorated his wheelchair with white ribbons that matched my dress, and he moved so smoothly, you'd think he'd been doing it his whole life. When we reached the altar, he stood up from his chair using his arms and hugged me tight. He whispered that he was proud of me, and that this was the best day of his life.